Hello and welcome everybody to Bounce Off, the number one SlamBall podcast worldwide. I am your host Sam Roberts. You can find me on social media at Quantum Roberts, that's Quantum Roberts, where we talk all things SlamBall. Today's episode is recapping last night's action, which was, for some teams, in fact all four teams that we're going to be talking about, this was the end of their regular season, guys. So the headlines very quickly. The Mob complete the perfect season. Darius Clark sets a single game record. The Rumble are out. And the Wrath need a little bit of tweaking. On top of that, the Gryphs as well. There's so much to talk about. And in a slight change from tradition here on Bounce Off, I'm not going to go game by game. And the reason for that is just by the end of the last game, I didn't have much I wanted to talk about with regards to the main event matchup. So we're going to talk about each team individually, right? Because I think that since that's the end of every team's regular season from last night, we've got one last night of regular season action coming up tonight, and then playoffs start on Tuesday with the quarterfinal matchups, which will be number 3 seed versus 6 seed and 4 seed versus 5 seed, and then we'll have a main event, which is a slam dunk contest. And then on Thursday, it's the semi-finals and the final. It'll be second seed versus the winner of 3 versus 6, and first seed versus the winner of 4 versus 5, I believe. I could have got that wrong, that section wrong there, because they changed it up slightly last second. So that's what we're looking at. It's playoff week. Exciting times for everyone. I'm going to get through last night's action very quick, and then we'll talk about where I see all four teams that played last night going into the first ever post-season of SlamBall in this new revitalized edition. So last night's matchups, the Gryphs beat the Wrath 65-63. It was a really, really good game. Ty McGee at the time, hint, hint, tied the second most points of the game with 52 points. This was maybe the game with the best break it, take it setup so far. Both teams used it very well. If you don't know what the break it, take it is, in SlamBall, the first foul of every quarter creates what's called a face-off. It's the guy with the ball who got fouled versus the guy who fouled them, one-on-one at the basket. You only get one per quarter unless it's the last 20 seconds of the game. Usually what happens on a face-off is if, regardless of what happens, the offense gets the ball back. In break it, take it in the last 20 seconds, if they miss, the defense gets the ball, and it's an opportunity for close games to be closed down, right? This was a really good game. The ending will, you will have heartbreak at the ending. Highly suggest going and watching it if you haven't already. It's a great matchup. Good job for the Gryphs to get that win. That makes it more, that's confirmed they'll be in the playoffs. It just depends where in the playoffs they're going to end up, I should think, is the answer. I don't think they definitely are going to be 5th or 6th. We'll get into that later, but that's confirmed they're getting in the playoffs. Second matchup of the night, the Mob beat the Rumble 75-35 in one of their biggest wins of the season, maybe second biggest. I think they had a 42-point win earlier this year as well, maybe even game 1 against the Rumble too. One of their best wins from a scoring perspective, but maybe not one of their best played games. Their coach is always looking for perfection, and I think if he's being hypercritical, this was maybe their 2 worst games on like Saturday, and if you're listening in, I'm doing quotation marks, because they won both games by a lot. The main event matchup, they beat the Griffins 88-50. But do you know what? We'll talk about it when we talk about the Mob at the end of my little lineup. But I think that Coach Kirsch might be a little bit disappointed going into this last, going into the playoffs, right? And we will talk about that when we get to the Mob. We're going to go through all four teams in sort of order of success this season, I guess, is what we'll go with. Like I said, Mob beat the Gryphs in the main event 88-50. The Gryphs didn't have anyone playing stopper for them, which we'll talk about later, but both of their stoppers are now injured. It was the highest score for a single team with 88 points for the Mob. Good job on the Gryphs on keeping the scoring, at least in there, that they weren't, 38 points is still a lot, but it could have been a lot worse with no stopper. Darius Clark for the Mob sets a new single game scoring record for SlamBall with 44 points, or 44 points, however you want to pronounce that, which means we've set the record twice in this first season back, and the Mob have completed the perfect quote-unquote regular season of 16 wins and 0 losses, right? If we look very quickly at the standings, or, I will do that when we talk about, when we talk about the Mob. But if we look very quickly at the standings, or, I will do that when we talk about, when we talk about the Mob. If we look very quickly at the standings, or, I will do that when we talk about, when we talk about the Mob. If we look very quickly at the standings, or, I will do that when we talk about, when we talk about the Mob. If we look very quickly at the standings, or, I will do that when we talk about, when we talk about the Mob. If we look very quickly at the standings, or, I will do that when we talk about, when we talk about the Mob. If we look very quickly at the standings, or, I will do that when we talk about, when we talk about the Mob. If we look very quickly at the standings, or, I will do that when we talk about, when we talk about the Mob. If we look very quickly at the standings, or, I will do that when we talk about, when we talk about the Mob. If we look very quickly at the standings, or, I will do that when we talk about, when we talk about the Mob. If we look very quickly at the standings, or, I will do that when we when we get to talking about the Mob and maybe some positives and negatives for how their season has gone and will continue to go, right? But for now, let's talk about the Rumble, right? I said we'll talk about the games and we'll talk about the teams in sort of order of importance. The Rumble are the first team to be eliminated from playoff contention. They don't have any more games tonight, which means there's no chance for them to get more than the one win they had this year. This is the only team who has, as yet, been eliminated from postseason contention. And I think a lot of it comes down to coaching. This team said early on, the first quote we heard from Coach Carter of significance was prior to the game against the Mob. And he said, little guys get tired, big guys stay big. And his whole thing, that seemed to make it seem like his whole thing was, we've got size on our side, or on our side. And they did. The Rumble were one of the biggest teams in the league in terms of width, in terms of length, in terms of all these different, size-based categories. They seemed to be the biggest team, right? The problem is, you can't talk the talk about playing big and then predominantly shoot from distance. And they were the team that were like, yeah, we're going to shoot from distance. We've taken the most shots. You didn't make the most shots. Well, you might have done. They might have actually made the most shots from distance, but that was volume, not quality, right? That's quantity of opportunity and attempts, not quality of shot taking, of shot making even. So you don't like to see that. On top of that, Bakari Copeland, their starting stopper, got injured after game 1. You don't like to see that either. Or maybe even game 2. But it was very early on in the season he got hurt, and the team didn't adjust around that. They put Tamyrick Fields at stopper, and he was great, but he did not want to play stopper. He wanted to come up and play gunner because that's what he was supposed to be doing, and he was very good at that as well. But even in terms of when Copeland was on the court, they were playing an offense that had him playing very high, which meant they were susceptible to transition defense issues on the other end. So the Rumble strategy was all over the place. The best game they played and the game that they won, I believe this was the game that they won, was the one where Coach Carter wasn't available for personal reasons, and the assistant coach for the Rumble took over, which, apologies, I'm going to have to look that up right now because I've forgotten off the top of my head who the Rumble assistant coach is. I'm pretty sure it's a James. There's a lot of players, a lot of coaches with the name James. No, it was Whitney White. That was it. Whitney White taking over looked, a lot better. Tamyrick Fields is listed as a stopper, but definitely he was a much better gunner option for this team, and that's what they wanted to play him at. Anyway, the Rumble. The strategy should have changed after week 1, and it didn't. They should have played more inside. Kalen Tippins-Hill was the 4th leading scorer in the league in terms of points per game because he was playing inside. If you'd been able to get Copeland back and just had him play a traditional stopper role, not rotate him in and out, just have him play that position, and you had Tamyrick Fields and, Kalen Tippins-Hill both being massive bodies going at the other team in the gunner spot, that's scary. And that's something that you'd have confidence in, next season, perhaps. The interesting thing raised by a friend of mine when we were talking about SlamBall yesterday is, will these teams look exactly the same next season? Will players be called back and said, hey, you're playing for these teams? Or will there be a redraft? Or will it be up to the players? Because you can't imagine that Mob team is going to want to split up. But all you need to do, and this is the hint, all you need to do is look at the comments on this YouTube channel, on the Bounce Off YouTube channel, and you will see a little hint that there are Rumble players who don't want to be coached by Coach Carter anymore. Right? There was a tweet put out. I don't even have the @ of who said it because there's no validity to what they've said. But they put it out there that the team is already turning on Coach Carter. That they didn't want to play for him anymore. And I asked J-Ton Williams about this when I interviewed him, and he basically said, no, that's not the case. But of course, that's what you're going to say mid-season. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of players on this team who think, I don't want to play for Coach Carter. Either he leaves or I want to play on a different team. And I think 6 out of the 7 guys on this roster can contribute to a SlamBall team in a meaningful way and can be good players going forward. I just don't know if that's in this system. If they come back with the same coach next year, and you kind of, Coach Carter's a big part of this league, or at least he should be. You don't always think that when in a game where the commentary says they're fighting for their playoff lives and it cuts to him eating popcorn. That wasn't great 2 nights ago. If he cares and if he wants to be involved, they'll bring him back. But will these players want to play for him? Or will Tamarick Fields and Caelan Tippins-Hill and Bakari Copeland maybe even, will those guys go, I want to play somewhere else. I want to play for a different team. Redraft us. I don't care. I just don't want to be here. Or will it be a case that you're now locked into playing for this team? Things I need to ask the league. I will give the caveat that I'm not going to ask those questions until the season is done for sure. Like, until the playoffs are finished with. Because they have a lot on their plate going forward this week. And while this is something of interest to keep in mind, it's not an immediate necessity to know. So it's not top of my priority list. But we can fantasy book. If you want to fantasy book having Bakari Copeland or Tamarick Fields, or Caelan Tippins-Hill joining a different team, tell me in the comments what team you think they should be playing on. Because Copeland, if he was fully healthy, could have been a great stopper. But we didn't see him fully healthy, and we didn't see enough of him to be able to tell that. Tamarick Fields was a decent stopper, could be a lot better with reps, but he definitely was itching to play the gunner role. He seemed so much better at that. He was pretty damn good, again, as your secondary option offensively for this team, while still playing defense. And then Tamarick Fields, he did a lot with a little for this team. He was 18 points per game, which was 4th in the league. He had a couple of 30 pieces. He was a dynamic scorer that did everything. He was 3rd on the team in assists per game, 3rd on the team in LBRs, and that's LBRs per game as well as totals, and 1st in the team in hits by a double-digit margin. So, Caelan Tippins-Hill, not Tamarick Fields, Caelan Tippins-Hill did a lot for this team. And then Tamarick Fields did a lot as well, and we just didn't see enough of Bakari Copeland. Victor Dean was good, Jaytwan Williams was good. Richard Washington was decent. They were all decent players, and I'd like to see them return in the future. I'm looking forward to This Week in SlamBall on Tuesday, which will come out hopefully before the playoffs start, because I'm going to be pitching to the guys, give me some players that you think can contribute in this league, that maybe aren't superstars, maybe aren't megastars, but are good SlamBall players that as we add players with more athleticism or more diversity or whatever it might be in the next couple of years, these guys should still be finding their ways onto rosters. So whether that's with a redraft or if there's trades to happen, who will know? Will a player get traded to the Rumble in exchange for Caelan Tippins-Hill? Will a team trade 2 players to get Caelan Tippins-Hill offense? I mentioned it before with the Buzz. You'd like to see them have a guy who can just go off for 30. Get Caelan Tippins-Hill. They don't want to trade anyone because the Buzz love their team, but maybe they've got guys that Coach Carter's interested in. Just a thought, just a question. So the Rumble could have been so much more. They weren't. They're the first team out. Will Coach Carter return? Who's to say? Will his team want to play for him? Who's to say? Will his team want to be on other teams? Who's to say? The comment section, maybe. The Gryphons, they are the next team that I want to talk about. They are lower down on the standings than other teams. They did get a win tonight over the Wrath, but there are some big concerns going into the playoffs for them. First of all, are they going to be a 5th seed or are they going to be a 6th seed? If they're a 6th seed, that means they're going to end up playing either the Slashers or the Buzz in the first round. And if it's the Slashers, they're going to get shredded on the defensive end. If it's the Buzz are well enough coached offensively that they'll score. But if it's the Slashers, that 2-man bottom tramp game with the double wing cuts coming from the side is just going to be way too much for a team without a stopper. And yes, that's right, the Gryphons don't have a stopper. As of right now, Connor Hollenbeck was out all weekend with an ankle injury he suffered last week. And Matthew Wilkerson missed the main event of last night with a shoulder injury. How serious a shoulder injury is, don't know. The league doesn't want to tell any of that stuff. But when it comes to Tuesday, because the Gryphs are either going to be 5th or 6th, they're definitely playing on Tuesday. We will get an injury report on Tuesday on the SlamBall website about 3 hours before game time. You have to expect that he's not going to play, which means that the Gryphons are going to have to get creative with how they're playing defense. They've shown it so far this season. I think Jelani Janice has been the head coach that's taken the most risks. Is that a good thing? Kayshawn Jones said in the post-game interview after game 1 that the Gryphs have been better than their record shows this season. And I think that's accurate to a degree. And is the experimentation a good thing or a bad thing? Well, he's definitely experimenting. That's the big thing. You know, we've had 2 stoppers in the Tramps at once, and that didn't really go too well. And because the video I was watching last night didn't have any audio, I couldn't hear commentary say that Wilkerson was out for the Gryphs. So I just thought, and you can understand why with that 2 stopper thing, I thought that Jelani Janice, head coach of the Gryphs, just went, screw it. We're just not going to play a stopper. Because what they ended up having to do was Adam Stanford played stopper. And so you had the 4 offensive, like, firecrackers for the Gryphs all on at the same time. In Holmes, Jones, Stanford, and Kelly, right? Who, in the order of Jones, Holmes, Stanford, Kelly, are all guys who can get their own baskets if they need to. And this game doesn't have, like, a definitive offensive identity most of the time. Most of the time, they do not. In previous weeks, it's really felt that it's just whoever's got the ball, go at the basket and try and score. And you have now 4 options that can maybe do that, all on the court at the same time. And they ran a play at one point that had 3 guys cutting off of 1 person. The only team we've seen do that is the Mob. Because Gage Smith shouldn't be playing stopper, he should be playing gunner, technically. You know, like, he is the best stopper in the world, but his position was supposed to be gunner pre-season. And so if you play as the Griffins did with an undersized stopper, you can have them run up and be part of that offensive set. I can't remember if they scored that play or not, but they ran it, and that was impressive at minimum. So it's interesting, right? It's very interesting that I couldn't tell if this was just Janice losing it, or if he was like, you know what, we're probably not going to beat the Mob anyway, but let's see if this is an effective decision. And it did, you know, obviously the Mob scored, you know, 20 plus in 2 quarters and 30 plus in the third. They only scored 8 points in the fourth quarter, right? Because they took their foot off the pedal. But, like, it did look at points like the Gryphs were able to disrupt the Mob offense around the island just because of how many bodies were there. Is this going to work long term? No, I don't think so. I think that they will probably get bounced on Tuesday, and that's not because the Gryphs aren't a good team. They are a good team. I just think Connor Hollenbeck was being touted as like top 4 stopper in the league minimum, and he went out. Wilkerson wasn't great, but he was serviceable, and he's now out. I just think not having anyone that can play stopper going into the playoffs is a bad sign for the Gryphs. I want them to do better because I you know, so many reasons, but minimum coolest jerseys in SlamBall. But outside of that, it's just you want them to do better. And I just don't think they're going to get out of the first round of the playoffs. And that's not because they're a bad team. It's just because the stopper position is the most important in SlamBall, and they do not have a stopper, right? They have strong offensive options, but not anything defensively right now. I think the maybe the choice is to, would it be possible? Is it possible, guys, for the Gryphs to run a 4-man perimeter defense and then no stopper? Probably not, because the only team that's been able to successfully run a full court defense has been the Mob. And by that, I mean Cam Horton just like bothers the guy with the ball for the other team. But no other team's doing that. And you kind of need to do that, because if you play perimeter defense at the perimeter, you give away a lot of violations and penalty points from accidentally getting in the way of guys going towards the Tramps. So, but is that maybe the best option for the Gryphs? No stopper. Are we just going to play 4 out and no guy back there? Or are we going to continue to like switch it between Stanford, Holmes and Kelly, sorry, Stanford, Holmes and Jones, who's going in there to, you know, try and play those stopper minutes? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they play on Tuesday. It'll be interesting to see if, like, you know, for argument's sake, if it was like a dislocated shoulder for Wilkerson, again, nothing to say that's what happened, right? If it's like a dislocated shoulder and they popped it back in, but they thought, we don't want to play you, just take a rest, he might be fine for Tuesday, and then you like their chances of getting out of the first round a little bit better. But if they fall to 6th, which there's a possibility that happens tonight. It's unlikely, but there's a possibility. If they fall to 6th, they are then playing either the Slashers or the Buzz, and I just don't think that the Gryphs can get past them. They certainly can't if they don't have a stopper. I don't know if they'll be able to get past them, even if they have Wilkerson back there. So Gryphs, I'm interested in seeing them go into the playoffs, but I don't have confidence in them watching them go into the playoffs. Next, we talk about the Wrath. Another team with stopper issues. Okay, Christian Gray's not even on the team roster on the website anymore. He's not coming back this season. He's still part of the injury reports. He was out last night. Sean Stith, their starting stopper, was part of the injury reports. He was out last night. I don't think we see either of them come back. I think if they'd been listed as questionable for last night and then didn't play, that maybe is a sign that they're coming back for playoffs. I just don't think it is likely. I've been saying that Trey Landers shouldn't have been playing stopper. And the reason I was saying that is because he hadn't been for this team until injuries had occurred. He's apparently listed as a stopper on the website. That's my bad for saying that's not his position, but it's not his position. He was part of the offense until Sean Stith went down with an injury, and since then he's had to play stopper. And I keep saying it, he is not at a good enough level, and neither is Greg Helt that they traded for. Neither guy is good enough to play stopper to a level that's going to impact a team on the other end. I think Landers is getting better, but not fast enough for the playoffs right now. Greg Helt is not good enough at stopper. He gets the occasional stop, but he's not the guy you're playing. And I think the difficulty is that while Landers is getting better, he needs more experience and more faith, because subbing him out for Helt at different points doesn't encourage the guy that he's doing a good job, or like, don't worry, I've got faith you'll get it in the next one. Just keep him on the field, on the court, and he might impress you, he might improve, he might do better, he might do all these things. But you can't do that if you take him out. If he's getting blown up, if he's getting tired and Helt's coming in, I understand. But I think you just have to ride or die with Landers at stopper and try and help him on the perimeter. And the Wrath are trying to do that, but they're not always getting in front of the guy. I think, obviously, the mob will destroy them, I think, in a playoff scenario. Will the Buzz, will that be a tighter game? Will the Slashers just shred that defense possibly? On the offensive side of things for the Wrath, it all goes through the butcher. Ty McGee, like I said, 42 points in game 1 against the Gryphs. He scored 30 the night before. His lowest score this season has been, since that big outburst, he's had 17 at one point, which was against the Ozone. Everything has to go through Ty McGee for this team to score, to do anything. There are points where Darius Slade can do bits. There are points where Nick Parks is able to score, but he's been so quiet the last 2 weeks. Jordan Jones came back last night, having not played the night before, and he didn't really contribute very much. Stephen Julian III has come back from injury, but he seems like he's not doing as much as he did in week 1, so it's tie or nothing, right? They ended that game against the Gryphs. It was 63-62, or it was something like that. Okay, I've got it right up here. So 65-63. 42 of those points came from Ty McGee, and there's points in the games, right, where they're trying to run an offense. The Gryphs have got a really good, and this is one of the things going back to the Gryphs and their defensive opportunities, right? It doesn't work without a stopper. It doesn't work without a stopper, but the Gryphs have got a really good island defense and like getting in the passing lanes, and that totally disrupts the Wrath. Because their offense is either Ty takes it, Darius Slade gets a quick drive, or Ty and Darian do a two-man game around the island. And when the Gryphs are there and they're just swatting at the ball, that's not going to work out for them. And on top of that, the Wrath aren't trying to draw foul calls, which every other team is doing when there's a player on the island beside them. They just dive into the defender and get the foul, make the referee have to make a decision. And the Wrath aren't doing that. And that's because they're just trying to score. Every single possession down the court, it's Ty, try and score. Ty, try and score. Is it a 3? No, but is it a layup? Good. We're getting points on the board. And that's the strategy for the Wrath offense right now. And teams are either going to shut down Ty, or the other option is we're going to let Ty do what he wants, and we're going to say no one else is scoring, right? And again, these are the 3 teams that are above the Wrath in the playoff standings, right? The Mob, their defense is phenomenal. Gage Smith is incredible, but perimeter defense is great. They can score from everywhere. They don't bother going into the bottom tramps. They just dive at you from the side and the top, right? And if they do go into the bottom, it's a score every time as well, right? Mob, unconsequentially, are probably going to beat the Wrath right now. The Slashers also have a really good, again, obviously, slashing offense, but the two-man wing cut into the bottom tramp, Landers can't keep up with that. We've seen it this weekend. He can't keep up with that. That's going to cut them to shreds. And the Buzz, even though I've talked about their scoring output and stuff like that, I'm lower on their offense. But the Buzz are one of the better teams in the league in terms of defense and grittiness and drive. And You don't think they're just going to say, okay, Ty, beat us, and then no one else is allowed inside the tramps? They could do that. They could just guard every other Wrath player and let Ty McGee score 45. They could let him get the record for most points in a game, and they'll probably squeak out a win with 48 or something like that, right? They are happy to let him do that and then just shut down everyone else. Or they can double team Ty and try and force Darius Slade to beat them, and then the score is also not going to favour the Wrath. So, do I think they're going to get out of the first round? I do. It will depend on the draw. If they're up against the Griffins in a 4-5 matchup, my money is on the Wrath 100% because Ty McGee is going to eat like whoever they put stopper alive. If they are up against, if it's a 4-5 matchup and they're going up against like the Lava, I think it's a much closer game. If it's the Ozone have shown they can shut down Ty McGee. So where do the Wrath go from here? They play through McGee. It's too late to change that now. There are moments, especially in games like last night, where the offense isn't coming off because the Gryphs were disrupting it so well. And then Ty McGee scores an extra 20 points because he's like, right, we're not scoring off of plays. I'm just going to go on my own. And it works. It works for him, but it doesn't work to get wins as the last 2 weeks have shown, or this last weekend has shown. It's the team I picked preseason. It's the team that I'm calling my team. I like them in the first round of the playoffs if they're getting the Gryphs. If they're getting the Lava or the Ozone, it's going to be a lot harder to get past those teams. And we'll talk about how the Lava or the Ozone could be the 5th seed in a moment. But that's where we stand with the Wrath. It's all McGee all the time. They don't have a good stopper option. But if you put your faith in Landers and just ride or die with him, instead of every single timeout having your head coach go, this is nass whipping, you've got to try harder. It just feels so negative from him, man. I just want the coach to say something positive or be upbeat about it, and he's not, and that sucks for me as a fan because this team could be great. Anyway, Wrath, if they're up against the Griffins, I think they're through. If they're up against any other team, I don't think there's a chance, but we'll talk about that more tomorrow or on Tuesday, likely on This Week in SlamBall. Finally, the Mob. An undefeated 16-0 season, ending with a 40-point win over the Rumble and a 38-point win over the Gryphs, which included the most points scored by a team in this season, and Darius Clark getting 44 points with 12 dunks and 16 of 22 on rim attacks. I'm going to take a drink because you need to just pause and drink that in. This is the first season that SlamBall is back. I ask you, the person listening or watching, let me know on social media, let me know in the comments of the YouTube video. Is this, if the Mob win all 16 games and then go on to the playoffs and win the championship, is this good for SlamBall or is this bad for SlamBall going forward? That's my question for you. I think it's good in terms of this gives a team for people to root for, and they've sold out of merch however many times. And it also gives a team for fans of other teams to root against. I would be jumping for joy if the Wrath were the first team to beat the Mob, whether it's this season or next, right? And if you start next season and the Mob lose game 1, for example, that's a big talking point. I'm excited for big talking points. I've got a podcast about this thing, right? So, is it good or bad? I think it's good. How do I feel about this undefeated season? I feel like no team can beat them going to the playoffs. They're winning. They won by an average margin of 26.5 points per game. The betting line from Circa Sports for the game against the Rumble, if you were betting on the Mob, they needed to score 23 points or more for you to get your money. And god damn it, they scored 40. And last night, here's the thing. I think Coach Kirsch is disappointed in how they played last night. Because some of it was messy. His team was up by 25 at one point. Brandon Simpson and Cam Hollins were checking in, and he grabs him and he says, wait. More structure. He basically was like, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was basically more structure. Get it together. Pull this thing together. And they're like, yes, coach. Because they know that even though we're up 25, we need to execute. And they were having fun. There was behind the back passes and no look passes going, but they were resulting in missed dunks, right? They were getting insane height. They were getting, really impressive scoring. But I think Coach Kirsch, if I asked him, and I might actually message him and just see what he says. It won't be in time for this episode, obviously, but I would love to know how high he was in the performance last night. Because I would not be surprised if Coach Kirsch came away from last night going, we can be better. And I know he does that every time, but this is we can be better because last night we didn't play as crisp as I want us to. We scored by 40. Yeah, the Rumble were checked out to a degree. We won by 38. Yeah, but the Griffins didn't have a stopper. You can find those little like nitpicks. And on top of that, you can also say, we didn't execute this, we didn't execute that. Our defense was still strong. We were still making the right plays, but we couldn't do anything complex. And we're going to need to do that to beat Taekwon Scott and Faisal Shafat in the playoffs. They were less direct, right? So, sorry, they were more direct, if anything. They were just gunning at the stoppers because the Rumble doesn't, Bakari Copeland can't do anything because he's not been there enough, and Tamarick Fields wants to try and score, and he can't get in the way of multiple guys diving at him, and then the Gryphs just didn't have a stopper. So they just were going, right? They didn't need to run anything complicated. They did not need to do it because they weren't ready to deal with it. And so, just gun at them. It wasn't that complicated. Gage Smith continues to be a monster. 13 LBRs and 13 stops in that first game, and then 9 points, 13 LBRs, 3 stops, and 6 steals in the main event. The question for the Mob is going to be, how much are teams gunning for them in the postseason? How prepared are they for that? Are they going to let the 16-0 record get to their heads? Because the players have been getting a little bit more cocky as the season's gone on. Cam Hollins did a face-off where he went behind his back, dunked it, and then did a backflip on the floor. Not backflipping the tramps. A backflip on the floor because these guys are gunning right now. And is a team going to say, no, we're going to put you on your ass and we're going to show you this is not the time to be joking around? My money's on the Buzz, by the way, for that. I think the Buzz are going to really rough up this Mob team, and the difficulty is going to be not giving away violations, but, proving that it's not all Mob all the time. The question is, are you betting against them? Everyone's gunning for them, but that's been all season, and rest versus rust. The Mob now don't play again until Thursday, right? The teams who are going through the first round, they're going to be playing on Tuesday. The Buzzsaw and Slashers, who are competing for second place, they play tonight. Will the Mob feel rusty when Thursday comes around? I doubt it. They haven't looked rusty realistically all season. But playoffs are different, and we'll see how that goes. So Mob, I wouldn't bet against them. I think they've got the championship lined up. I think the best team that's going to beat them is the Buzz, because that's been the second best team all season. But they don't have the scoring output, and I think the Slashers are the next best team because they're the next best team all season. But I don't know if their defense is good enough. But my goodness, I'm excited for playoff action. But that's not right. Playoffs aren't yet. We still have 3 matchups tonight with 4 teams, and there are massive playoff implications for all 4 teams involved tonight, right? The matchups we have are Buzzsaw versus Ozone and Lava versus Slashers, with the winners of those 2 matches meeting in the main event. You guys know how this works by now. Here's why these matchups are significant. We'll start with the Buzzsaw and the Slashers because I just mentioned them, and when it comes to the second seed. As it stands, the Buzzsaw are currently 8 wins and 5 losses. The Slashers are 7 wins and 5 losses, okay? That's where we are at when it comes to their standings, right? Buzz are second seed, Slashers are third. If either team wins both games, they will get the second seed, right? Because if the Buzzsaw win 2 games, the Slashers will have, the Buzzsaw will end with 10 wins. The Slashers would have ended with, for argument's sake, in my mind, it's going to be Buzz versus Slashers in the main event, right? If it's Buzz versus Slashers in the main event, whichever team wins is getting that second seed. Because if the Buzz win, they will go to 10 and 5, and then they're just definitively the better team. If the Slashers win, then it will be the Buzz would end on a 9 and 6 record, and the Slashers went on a 9 and 5, and so on win percentage, they would go up into the second seed, and the Buzz would drop down to third, meaning they would be playing the 6th placed seed in the playoffs, right? So whichever team wins, if either of these teams wins both games, Buzzsaw or Slashers, they jump up to second place. If both teams were to lose both games, the Buzzsaw would stay in second place and the Slashers would stay in third. If the Slashers were to win one and the Buzzsaw were to lose one, it would put them both at the end of the day at 8 and 6, and it would go to main event wins, which, as it stands, one moment please, because the official SlamBall website doesn't have main event wins, but they're tracking at... Oh no, that was just on the broadcast. It would go down to main event wins regardless, right? So that's the if either the Buzzsaw or the Slashers win both games tonight, they take the second seed. If the Slashers win one and the Buzzsaw lose one, it'll go to main event matchups. If both teams lose their game in the first sense, as in SlamBall, you play one game. If you win one game, you go to a main event match. If both of these teams lose their first game, which I can't see happening realistically, then it would be Buzzsaw taking second, Slashers taking third. Right? That's the breakdown. When it comes to the Ozone and the Lava, right? The playoffs is confirmed what teams are in it, apart from one last slot, right? Ozone and Lava. Again, the matchups are Buzzsaw versus Ozone and Lava versus Slashers. If either the Ozone or the Lava win that first game, they will get the last spot in the playoffs. They will get the 6th seed. If both teams lose, I believe the Lava would stay in 6th place on win percentage, right? But if either of these teams wins both games, right? If for instance, right, say the main event tonight is Ozone versus Lava, right? If either of those teams wins the main event matchup, Ozone or Lava, they would jump to 5th place and take on the Wrath in the first round of the playoffs because of win percentage over the Gryphs, right? Because the Gryphs have more losses because they've played in more main events and things like that. So that's what would happen. I believe if either team, if one team gets the 2 wins and one team only gets 1 win, 1 loss, they would drop out the playoffs. So that's where we're at. Quick breakdown. Buzzsaw and Slashers, if either team wins both games, they'll get the 2nd seed. Ozone and Lava, if either of those teams gets a win, they take the 6th seed. If one of those teams manages to get 2 wins, they'll take the 5th seed. That's how the playoffs is looking if tonight. This is what you need to be aware of for tonight's playoff action. That's a lot to cover. Hopefully you've enjoyed my quick look at all these teams. I feel bad for the Rumble, but hopefully they bounce back next season. The Wrath, I wish could do better. The Gryphs, I'm sorry for them because without a stopper, it's looking really hard. And the Mob are the best team in SlamBall, and it's not been a question for like 2 weeks. I gave you the breakdown of what we can expect from tonight's action in terms of playoff stuff. Get at me on Twitter. I'm not calling it X, but you can call it that if you want, whatever. Get at me there and we'll talk about SlamBall. You can talk with myself. You can talk with Coach Bear or Craig Skitstimus, who are the guys who join me on This Week in SlamBall. You can talk with lots of other people like the SlamBall Network and the Slamcasters podcast, who you should be listening to for other SlamBall coverage. They interviewed the whole Mob team earlier this week and it was a great listen. I finally got a chance to check it out. Support SlamBall. Support the people supporting SlamBall, because without all of us doing our things, this league can only get better if we keep doing what we're doing. If I keep covering it, if the Slamcasters keep doing their thing, if Coach Berkoff is still confident and passionate, and if the SlamBall Network are still passionate, and if you guys still want to listen, if you still want to watch, if you still want to talk and engage with SlamBall, that's the only way this thing can get better. We've got one more night of regular season action, and as I've just laid out to you, it's all to play for, and then it is the first playoffs in Revitalized SlamBall. Can you tell in my voice or looking at me on the screen? I am ecstatic. Let's get it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Comment down below. Give us a review. Give us a rate. Whatever it may be, thank you for being part of Bounce Off. Thank you for being part of SlamBall. Have a great rest of your day. We've got more action tonight.